you have the Rajputs of northwest India breeding horses. But before 1,000 years, we don't find any horse breeding activity. Now, when you read Mahabharata, again, you never find anyone riding a horse. They're always driving chariots. So you have Krishna is the Sarathi of Arjun, the Rathi. Why? Because one person is riding the chariot, the other one is holding the bow and shooting the arrow. So you have Surya Devata who rides a horse, 7 horses are pulling his chariot. But Surya's son, Revanta, who is first mentioned in the Puranic literature, he is a horse rider.
Horses in India are not just animals or beasts of burden. They are, in fact, very important element to understand the cultural history of our country. How? Let's find out in Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik. Hello everyone, I am Manas Srivastava and you are watching Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik. Now in this particular series of Art and Culture, as you must have noticed, we take up some very relevant questions from the perspective of UPSC examination and for the culture lovers who want to understand about art and culture, various themes. And we have an interaction and take up questions with our expert, Devdutt Pattanaik. In the previous episode, we talked about elephants and to understand how animals play important role in understanding Indian culture, how important they are as a part of Indian culture. Now, in this particular episode, we are going to go a little forward and talk about horses. So welcome Devdutt. Devdutt, we all know that horses are not native to India if we see the history of our country. So why were they not bred in our country, and what should we know about how they came to Indian landscape?
So today, we have to discuss the cultural significance of a horse. Now, horses are not natural to the Indian subcontinent. We know that there were ancient horses in India over 10,000 years ago, but during the Ice Age, they are wiped out. So there are some bones that are found in India that indicates that horses at one time did exist in South Asia, but in the Ice Age, they are wiped out. After that, horses have always been imported. And it is important why horses are important to understand is because think of a king. He cannot control more than 100 kilometers of his land if he doesn't have horses. While elephants were the main way in which kings emerged in India, it is the horse that gives the king a lot of control to defend his territory, to collect taxes, and the horses were associated with knights and kings and administrative machinery. So today's UPSC people in the old days would need a horse. Without a horse, you cannot manage it. So traditionally, elephants were very important, and therefore the early empires of India emerged in Bihar side, where there were a lot of elephants. The best elephants came from Odisha. That's the region where you find the early elephants being used by the Mauryan kings. Very important part of history. But horses start to come to India from northwest India. So it comes via Punjab, and it's very important to know that. Now, some people ask, why were horses not being bred in India? Because you see horses everywhere and you just assume horses were there always in India. Now, horse breeding in India only starts about 1,000 years ago, roughly at the time when the Turks and the Afghans were entering India, and that's when you have the Rajputs of northwest India breeding horses. But before 1,000 years, we don't find any horse breeding activity. The reason for this is many. One is, of course, the monsoons. Because of the monsoons, it leaches the selenium and other important minerals from the grasses, and therefore the grass is not nutritious enough for the horses that come to India. So also in the monsoon, the hooves get infected, softened, which affects the health of the horses. In summer, there's not enough water for the horses. The question is, but they were raised in the desert regions of Arabia, so why not in India? Most of the land was used for farmlands, and in order to, we don't have flat grasslands, the kind of which are there in Russia, in Iran, where alfalfa grass is grown, which is the kind of land the horses love. Flat grasslands in a colder climate, and they were domesticated for the first time 4,000 years ago in the steppe regions in southern Russia and were imported to India. That's an important point to remember, that horses are not native to India. They're difficult to breed in India. To stay healthy in India, it requires a lot of expertise to do it. This expertise really emerges in India about 1,000 years ago in the Rajput zones, which is what makes Rajputs unique. They were able to breed horses, and that is what makes it special. In fact, if you think Rajput, you should remember the horse.
Thank you so much, Devdutt. It was very important to, before coming to the significance of horses in Indian culture, to understand that why were they not, as a part of native, they were not bred in our country traditionally in history, or why were they not native in our country? Because for specifically from exam perspective, I can say that there can be statement, reason, assertion questions based on these two statements, whether horses are native to our country or not in history, and why, if not. So these kind of a question can be framed, and students must know whether it is animals or plants or fruits, vegetables, which are originally from our country and which are not. So questions can be framed accordingly. Now let's come back to the topic, this interesting topic which you are doing on relevance of animals in Indian culture and horses today. So Devdutt, now we can discuss the significance of horses in Indian culture, whether we see it in iconography or we see it in our mythology or history. How are they significant in our Indian culture? Please.
Now, why is it important to understand the history of the horse? Is because it's familiar, but we don't understand it well. And horses in India have to be seen in three distinct phases, or maybe four. The first phase is where there were no horses. So if you go to the Indus Valley civilization, there are no horses. Then the second phase is when horses come to India. But these are tiny horses you can't ride these horses. They had to pull chariots. Now, in order to pull chariots, they were tiny horses. So you needed a wheel which was light. So the spoked wheel was designed. Now, the spoked wheel is an important cultural symbol in India, but it really comes with the horses. So if the horse was domesticated in southern Russia, in the steppes region, they also invented the spoked wheel. And this is the great contribution of the Indo-European people who lived in the steppe grassland, which is today's Ukraine and southern Russia. From there, both the horse and the chariot traveled to different parts of the world roughly 3,500 years ago. They go to Egypt, it goes to Mesopotamia, it even goes to northern Europe in Denmark, it goes to China, and it is when it enters India. And the earliest horse poetry is found in India in Rig Veda. In fact, Rig Veda has over 200 references to horses, even more than the cow. Important point to remember. And there are many horse hymns. You find stories of horses, horse chariots, gods riding horse chariots, war on horse chariots, and of course, the sacrifice of horses, the slaughter of horses, which was being done by the nomadic people from the Eurasian steppes. So the first phase of horses is about the horse-drawn chariot, the spoked wheel chariot. Now, some people will think of this excavation site in Uttar Pradesh, Sonauli, where people say there is a chariot. Well, it's probably not a chariot. Probably it's a wagon pulled by bulls, because the wheel is not spoked. So it is a solid wheel, and therefore it's not probably a chariot. Horses would not have been able to pull it. But scholars are debating this. But there are no horse bones found. So the jury is out there, but generally it is too early for horses. 1800 BC is when the excavation site is there. Horses come to India after 1500 BC. They come via the Bolan Pass and the Khyber Pass, which is through which horses have been coming to India every year for 3,500 years. It's an important point to remember. Now, the first phase, remember, is these Aryan horses. Now, it is important to remember that in Ramayana, you don't find much reference to chariots. You have chariots, they don't play a very important role. I mean, Ram is fighting Ravan, and we are told in later Ramayans that Indra sends his own chariot with Matali as the chariot rider to help Ram. Now, this is important because Indra riding a chariot is found in this story, but in traditional understanding, Indra rides an elephant, a white elephant called Airavat. So it tells you something interesting about Indian culture, how original Indra had a chariot and later Indra had an elephant, was riding an elephant. He had his howdah and his mahuts. Now, the first phase is chariots. Now, when you read Mahabharata, again, you never find anyone riding a horse. They're always driving chariots. So, you have Krishna is the Sarathi of Arjun, the Rathi. Why? Because one person is riding the chariot, the other one is holding the bow and shooting the arrow. This image is very famous in Persia in 500 BC, where kings are shown hunting lions from the chariot. The earliest horse riding images are also found in Mesopotamia, with Ashurbanipal is shown riding a horse. But if one looks carefully, he does not have a saddle, he doesn't have a stirrup. Saddle is the seat on which you sit on a horse, stirrup is where you put your foot in, and then you have a spur, which is this kind of a sharp object at the foot with which you guide the horse. But people used to traditionally use the whip. Now, this horse rider is not there in the Mahabharata at all. You only have the Sarathi with the bow and arrow, and the Rathi holding the reins of a chariot. So you have Surya Devata who rides a horse, 7 horses are pulling his chariot. But Surya's son, Revanta, who is first mentioned in the Puranic literature, he is a horse rider. He's riding a horse. So the father has a chariot, the son Revanta, the god of hunting, has is a horse rider. It comes later. So the horse riders of India are very important. They are the earliest invaders of India, if we may call them. The Greeks, the Yavanas, the Shakas, who control much of the Aravalli region, Gujarat region, the Kshatrapas, the Pahallavas or the Parthians, they are also coming in horses. Most importantly, Kushans are coming in horses. They are the horse traders. They are bringing horse to India. Very, very important, because the earliest image of Krishna, which is found amongst the early images in the Kushana period, is Krishna killing a horse demon called Keshina. Keshina sounds almost like Kushana. Is there a relationship? We can speculate. Kansa sounds like Kanishka. Again, we can speculate that Krishna stories, the early Krishna stories, the Vrishni stories, are linked to horse riders entering India 2000 years ago from northwest India, from Central Asia. Now, the horse breeding sites have shifted from steppe grasslands to Central Asia, which is now Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. That's where the best horses were found. And that's where they were breeding. And from there, horses would come to India for a long, long time. So the Scythians, the Parthians, the Kushanas, they are all horse riders. The Greeks were horse riders. Alexander is famous for his horse riders. But when we think of Chandragupta Maurya, when we think of Ashoka, we don't think of horses, we think of elephants. Because they were coming from the Bihar region where there were elephants. So horse riders are very, very important part, and this is when Buddhism happens. Look at the story of Buddha. When he's going through a city and he encounters death, decay, and disease, he's riding a chariot. But when he's leaving the palace, he's on a horse. He's riding a horse called Kantaka, and there's a very famous story of Kantaka cannot bear the sight of his master leaving, and he dies of heartbreak and is reborn as a Buddhist. And this story is told by Ashwaghosha. Now, this poet tells the story, Ashwaghosha, the horse whisperer. He is telling the story to the Kushana kings, to Kanishka. That is around 100 AD is when Kanishka is there. And Ashwaghosha is telling the story of the Buddha and the horses to the horse breeders, the Kushanas. And you find this connection, which is a culturally very important idea. This is roughly the time, Kushana period is when the Ramayana and Mahabharata have been completed. Ramayana, very few references to horses, some horse chariots. Mahabharata, only horse chariots, no horse riders. Horse riders start appearing in the Puranic literature with Revanta, the son of the sun god. And then you have Suddenly, if you let's go back to the Vedas once again. In the Vedas, you have stories of horse-headed beings. Dadichi gives the Soma secrets because his head is replaced by that of a horse. In the Brahmana literature, we are told that Yagyavalkya fights with his teacher and later learns the Vedic secrets from the sun god himself, who takes the form of a horse. There's something about the horse and the sun which is always connected. The sun is associated as taking this horse form and revealing Vedic secrets. And the same god, this horse headed god, appears in the Puranic literature, even in the Mahabharata, as Hayagriva, a form of Vishnu. Hayagriva is also the form of a demon who steals the Vedas, and Hayagriva is also the form of Vishnu who fights for the Vedas. And Kalki is sometimes shown as a horse headed being. And all these ideas emerged 2000 years ago. So, in the early Vedic period, you have horse sacrifices and horse chariots 3000 years ago, horse sacrifice, horse chariots 3000 years ago. 2000 years ago, you have the cavalry, you have the horses emerging, the horse riders, Revanta the god, but you have no saddle or stirrups. There is a toe stirrup. Now, it's an important little detail that people should remember. The toe stirrup, which is a sort of crude stirrup, and the first symbol of it is found in Sanchi Stupa. There are images which show a man with a toe stirrup in the Sanchi Stupa. Very important point to remember. In the Buddhist caves, you have horses being shown, being offered to kings and to the Buddha. The horses are sometimes shown with wings, which brings us to the idea of Uchchaishrava, the god, the winged horse or the flying horse who emerged from the ocean of milk, a story first told in the Mahabharata 2000 years ago. You also have stories of flying horses whose wings were taken away by Indra. And this story of flying horses and flying elephants whose wings are taken away by Indra perhaps are stories of wild horses being domesticated or wild elephants being domesticated. You find these stories. Now, these are all happening around 2000 years ago. No saddle, no stirrup. So, when does the saddle and stirrup come to India? This is the third phase. It probably comes with the Hunas, but most probably with the Turks and the Afghans who changed the history of India around 1000 years ago.
Thank you so much, Devdutt. Aspirants must note that whether the examples taken from epics like Mahabharata, or the relevance of spoked wheels, or in various other forms that we see horses in images, in sculptures, everything has a relevance for your examination also. Okay, so when Devdutt is explaining all these things, please remember these examples which he's talking about can be standalone questions as well. So a lot of times we think that how this is relevant for our examination. Well, they are relevant both for your prelims when it is dealing with ancient medieval history also, and at the same time when you get a descriptive type of question in your mains GS paper 1. All right. So you must, understand this topic in a wholesome manner. And in the next episode, where we're going to continue with the relevance of horses in our Indian culture, you will be able to understand that these animals are a very integral part of our Indian culture to understand the tradition. And you should develop a thinking of how, animals like lion, tiger, other animals or birds become very important part of our culture, so that you can answer a lot of creative questions which UPSC frames at times in its mains examination. Don't forget that UPSC mains exam is also approaching, so you must understand these topics so that you can score better in your exam. That's all from today. Please do subscribe to Indian Express YouTube channel. Also, don't miss the UPSC Essentials initiatives of the Indian Express, which you will get on indianexpress.com. Do write to me at manas.srivastava@indianexpress.com, and we promise you to come back with more questions, more queries, more topics in interaction while we interact with Devdutt Pattanaik in Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik. That's all from today. As I always say, think smart, work hard, conquer your goal. Bye-bye.